Let's head to Washington again with Washington Post White House reporter David Nakamura joining us now to talk a little bit about all these things unfolding. So, listen, Sean Spicer was asked specifically, is the goal here mass deportation? He said definitely not. But what has your reporting on these policies revealed?
Well, there's a little bit of a rhetorical sleight of hand going on here, because if you listen to the White House or DHS yesterday, they were saying a lot of the same things that President Obama said. We're going after hardened criminals, people with terrorist ties, and people with, long criminal records. But that's exactly what President Obama says. What the guidelines yesterday did, though, was dramatically expand that pool. People may be driving without a driver's license. Smaller misdemeanors could be grounds for removal. But even as your package said, folks that an immigration officer determines to be a risk to national security or to society. And so that's a fairly vague term, which I think advocates are saying this allows pretty much anybody to get swept up in the dragnet of immigration enforcement, could be not only removed, but removed more quickly than previous administrations.
And David, the question is, are these new guidelines in keeping with what President Trump promised his supporters on the campaign trail, or are they more severe?
Well, I've heard both things, actually. It's interesting. If you listen to the sort of hardliners on the conservative side, they want him to get rid of that program for the Dreamers that has given work permits to 750,000 people. The administration did not overturn that yesterday. That was a relief to the immigrant rights community. On the other side, though, immigrant rights advocates are saying, look, he promised to have this deportation force, removing large numbers of people across the country, and that's what he did yesterday, was lay the infrastructure for that. DHS caution, it's going to take a while. It's costly. It's not going to happen overnight, they said. But again, advocates are saying this is setting the groundwork for much greater numbers of deportations. Over the last couple of years of the Obama administration, deportations fell dramatically by about 100,000 people over the last couple of years. And so this sets the groundwork, to ramp it back up to the previous highs, or maybe even more.
See, that was the question I was going to ask you, because Barack Obama sort of earned the nickname the deporter-in-chief. And for a period of time where we're talking about record deportations under the Obama administration. So you're saying that we could, in fact, see higher numbers with these new guidelines?
The record high was in 2013. And there's, people argue over these statistics. But according to DHS, 430,000 people were deported in 2013. That was a high. President Obama on that year went for comprehensive immigration reform. People probably remember it was a year-and-a-half-long battle. The Senate passed a comprehensive bill that would have allowed, among other things, a path to citizenship for many millions of people here illegally. But that was shot down and killed, basically, by House conservatives. It didn't allow a vote in 2014. After that is when the president took steps to more tightly focus law enforcement on hardened criminals. Felons, not families, is what he said. And that changed the numbers dramatically. This is what you're seeing now. Donald Trump do the opposite and really open this up, not only expand the pool, but make things easier, faster to remove people, to move people over to Mexico as they wait their hearings, and the catch and release, as folks talked about, as people wait for backlogged courts for their day in court. So advocates are saying, look, this could be a big problem for due process, and you can probably expect some legal challenges down the road.
And David, speaking of Mexico, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly will be in Mexico today talking border issues with Mexican officials. Does that send a message that, look, Donald Trump may say things to his supporters at rallies on the campaign trail when he was running for the presidency about Mexico, which some people took to be derogatory, but in sending these two to Mexico, it shows that you need Mexico's help to implement these immigration policies.
Absolutely. You need Mexico's help for that, for economics. This is one of our biggest trading partners. And traditionally, the U.S. president has had, immediate relations with Mexico in terms of even a presidential trip early. President Trump, we know, had invited the Mexican president to the White House. That was canceled after Donald Trump signed that first executive order to start construction of a border wall. And so there's tension there. And you're right. The rhetoric is pretty hot and heated. But these two top officials are going to take probably a more nuanced message there. They need Mexico's help on national security issues, but also as well as trade and economics. And so it's a high-stakes meeting, and there is a lot of tension. I mean, immigration's a sort of a hot-button issue on both sides of the border. There's a lot of families who have members of the families on both sides of the border, and as well as Central America. And so there's a lot of tensions, passions, and family ties going on here.
David, we've been covering these town hall meetings where lawmakers are being shouted down by their constituents. A lot of people are angry about the immigration policy, as well as other things like health care. But I'm wondering, what your take is on all this anger. Do you think it will ultimately result in a change in policy, or where do you think it's going?
Not necessarily. I mean, I don't know that we saw a very divided country. We've seen that in the last few election cycles. That's not a surprise. Barack Obama promised sort of, bringing folks together, bridging that divide, and even he acknowledged at his final State of the Union that he had failed in that, and we were more divided than ever. I think Donald Trump, to some degree, exploited that and has allowed, or sort of even, sort of built his campaign around some of those divisions. He's talked about trying to unite the country, but I think he's playing largely to his base. This resistance we're seeing around the country from Democrats and other progressives will probably continue in all manners, as we're seeing, including at these town halls. But I don't know that it's going to necessarily change policy. Although I will say, on Obamacare, you're seeing obviously it was very broadly popular. Millions of people have health care that did not. And now Republicans are starting to walk a little finer line here about what they're going to do.
All right, David Nakamura of the Washington Post. As always, we appreciate the time today.